More businesses are optimistic about 2025 compared with last year. That's according to the latest survey conducted by Singapore's Apex Business Chamber. But it says perennial challenges like manpower costs and talent continue to cast a shadow. Of the over 500 companies polled, 40% say they are satisfied with the current business climate. This is a 10 percentage point increase from the previous survey. It's also double the figure for those who were dissatisfied. Manpower costs remain a top concern for all firms, but a growing challenge has emerged. Increased trade tensions and potential tariff wars are causing firms to feel uncertain about customer demand. That's particularly so for those in the accommodation, F&B and retail sectors. The report also found that larger firms now view Singapore as less attractive as a hub for global talent. The sentiment dipped from 55% in the last year to 47% this time around. The Singapore Business Federation says this could likely be due to tighter foreign workforce policies.
Businesses are also looking to government for support to help them to manage their financing needs, to develop human capital, and to digitalize for business transformation. So the top three wishes from businesses for Budget 2025 are schemes to address cost pressures, schemes to attract and retain the local workforce, and schemes to address foreign manpower issues.
To look much deeper into these findings, we're joined by Mr. Kok Ping Soon. He's CEO of the Singapore Business Federation that conducted this survey. We just heard from your colleague there expressing the top three wishes of Singapore businesses when we look ahead to Budget 2025. Oh, yes, this year.
This year.
How likely are we to get these wishes in this budget?
Well, we have to stay tuned to February 18 when PM deliver his budget debate, the budget speech. But certainly businesses are hoping that there will be measures to help in terms of addressing the rising costs. So if you look at some of the budget measures that were most welcomed by businesses last year, the top of the list was the 50% corporate income tax rebate. It was the Skills Future Level Up program, as well as extension of the Skills Future credit. So for this year, I think top on the businesses' wish list are measures to address the cost increase. I think certainly further rebate of the corporate income tax will, of course, be welcome, but also perhaps even more targeted measures. You also mentioned that rental cost has increased, so perhaps some form of commercial property tax rebate, or even certain wage credit schemes to offset the increased manpower costs. The second category of what businesses are looking for will really be in programs to help support them in their investment in skills training. And the third is really measures to look at how we can do for foreign workers relief, whether an extension of the foreign worker levy increase, not to increase it so soon, or perhaps a moderation in increase in qualifying salaries.
So this wish list would reflect quite accurately, I think, business concerns. So I think we outlined briefly there, and you've got a good comment on this. So the top concerns, apart from consumer demand uncertainty, that's relatively new this time around. But before that, so for example, rental costs, manpower costs, these are, as we just said, perennial concerns. But in terms of ranking, they have swapped around.
They have. I think manpower costs continue to be the top over the last few years. I think what surprises us is the spike in terms of the uncertainty in consumer demand. It was outside of the top five. I think as you have early reported, it shot up to number 2. And I think this really reflects the external uncertain environment. If you think about it, and by the way, this survey was actually done before the Trump elections, right? So that would inject even greater uncertainty.
But you know, we've been fearing this tariff hike thing for a very long time.
Very long
Trump,
time.
First term, that was his thing, and he's never been unclear about proceeding with that should he win office.
So indeed, next year will be a year, or rather this year will be a year of a disruption. But it's not just a Trump factor. Let's not forget there continue to be wars in Middle East and in Ukraine. So that's going to impact on supply chain. Let's also not forget that the second largest economy, China, is not really in a good state of affairs. So the demand will also be quite weak. So added onto that, the Trump administration, the threat of using tariffs is going to add greater uncertainty. I think what we are looking at now is geopolitics is starting to be a major factor of consideration for companies, which is why whether companies will invest and expand really is now no longer based on some boardroom discussion on what to do strategically, but they need to take into context the geopolitical dynamics.
All right, I think your survey also businesses are not just sitting back saying, well, we'll just see what happens when elections, the results coming out of Washington. They are taking proactive measures to, as far as they can, for example, cut business costs. So your survey also showed that's an encouraging thing. We're not just sitting there taking it as small as we are, taking it as open as we are, taking it as we are dealt. We are also taking as much action as we can, and our government also taking whatever policies, measures that it can to safeguard our own interests and survival of our own businesses.
Indeed, and I think I use a phrase, as a small open economy and as many businesses, we are not in a position to direct the winds, but certainly we can adjust our sails, and build our own capabilities. So it's important that businesses are not just focusing on a defensive play by reducing your costs, but take an offensive play to invest in capabilities building to continue that transformation process. And the survey do point to certain findings that we are quite encouraged. In fact, despite the high manpower costs, there are more companies who are prepared to invest in skills upgrading. There are more companies who are prepared to do digitalization. And all this speaks well of the resilience and adaptability of our businesses.
We always ask this, Kennedy, look not to others to help you. See what you can do for yourself. But that said, there are costs, and this has come up whenever I've spoken to you, where we actually do need government investment, government expenditure. There's only so much especially a small company can do in terms of targeted support, given that resources are never unlimited. What can we expect that would deliver, I suppose, the biggest bang for your buck in terms of government support?
I think the biggest bang for the buck, yes, I think some relief for cost pressure is important, but I think the biggest bang of the buck will be government continued investment, in fact, doubling down of investment in the future. Help companies to be future ready. Support them in more investments in skills upgrading. Support them to do their green transition. Support them to use better technology. And also, even in such turbulent world, help them to move overseas and expand overseas. I think these are investments that will be quite worthwhile, that will actually produce longer term returns.
All right, I pick up on this because we mentioned it. Fewer, especially large companies, see Singapore as a magnet
for
or
global
a hub
talent.
For global talent. Is this something of concern to you, or do you think it's expected and something we should factor in, given that we're going to have policies to, for example, to protect local manpower? So there will be sentiment like this. Does this surprise you?
It doesn't surprise, but it is of concern, I would say. Of course, the decline is not so sharp, 43 to 41%. But as you pointed out, what we're concerned is more pronounced for the bigger companies. And I think there's a couple of factors in play. Yes, of course, the tightening foreign manpower policy is one. Let's not forget, Mercer's report say that Singapore is the second most expensive city for expats after Hong Kong. So that does play a certain role in that. And we are concerned about its attractiveness and impact on our competitiveness. Let's not forget that for Singapore to grow its economic potential of 3%, you cannot just rely on productivity. We need to continue to be an open economy for talent, for ideas, for innovation. So it is important that we increase what I call the absorptive capacity of the society for foreigners. Now, our survey suggests that actually, by and large, Singaporeans are welcome of foreigners. 60% of the population welcome foreigners. But I think we can do much more. And if we are not able to increase this absorptive capacity, and it's not just hard infrastructure, but soft infrastructure, like societal attitudes of foreigners, is going to be our Achilles heels in terms of our ability to reach our economic potential. And I think we should spend some time discussing this merit of doing that. And businesses, I think, can do much more.
All right, so I say policy is changing mindsets, always very much difficult.
And difficult. Changing hearts are always very difficult.
So actually how the average person deals with, say, foreign manpower. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Mr. Kok Ping Soon, CEO of the Singapore Business Federation.